Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Winnebago County Board meeting. Tonight is Thursday, August 8th, 2024. We're going to do something to announce tonight is a moment of silence for former Winnebago County Board Chairman Lawrence E. Ralston. If everyone could please stand, and I'll read this. Former Winnebago County Chairman Larry Ralston passed away on July 29, 2024 at 98 years old. He was elected to the Winnebago County Board in 1976 and then appointed to the board as a member of the board as chairman from 1978 to 1980. Larry was the great-great-grandson of Roscoe Township's first permanent settler, Robert J. Cross. He was also the grandfather of Shelley Turner, who is a deputy currently with the sheriff's office. Larry and his wife Hazel recently celebrated their 77th wedding anniversary. The visitation will be held on August 16, 2024 from 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. with the service to follow at 3:30 at Roscoe Township Community Center. All memorial donations may be made to the Harlem-Roscoe Fire Protection District or the Roscoe Township Historical Society. So please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Now, in substitution for Ms. Fellers, Mr. McCarthy would do the pledge and the prayer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Heavenly Father, on this wonderful Thursday summer evening, please protect us, guide us, and make sure all our decisions are made with our good conscience first and foremost, while also keeping you first and foremost. Let's all protect our first responders, our police, our fire, and those out there on the front lines that are taking care of us each and every day. And let's ever be so grateful and thankful for the gifts that we do have in our lives. All under your name, dear Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Mr. Thompson, are there any agenda announcements this evening?
No announcements to the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk Gumbau, can you please call the roll?
Certainly. Thank you, Chairman. We will start tonight with Mr. Thompson. Here. Mr. Webster. Here. Mr. Arena. Here. Mr. Booker. Present. Mr. Butita. Here. Mrs. Crosby. Here. Ms. Fellers. Mrs. Gorel. Present. Mr. Guevara. Ms. Hansert. Here. Mr. Hoffman. Present. Mr. Lindmark. Present. Mr. McCarthy. Present. Mr. McDonald. Present. Mr. Neighbors. Here. Mr. Penny. Here. Mr. Salgado. Present. Mr. Scroll. Here. Mr. Sweeney. Present. Mr. Tassoni. Chairman, that's 17 board members present, 3 board members absent.
Very good. We do have a quorum this evening. Tonight we have 3 speakers. I'm going to read a brief statement. The comments shall be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers may not address zoning matters which are pending before the ZBA, zoning committee, or the county board. Personnel matters or pending or threatened litigation may not be addressed in open session. An individual may speak a maximum of 3 times per calendar year on the same topic. This prohibition shall include the repetition of the same topic in a statement on what is purported to be a different topic. Personal attacks or inappropriate language of any sort will not be tolerated. Our first speaker is Janice Mathis. If you want to come forward, Janice.
Thank you guys so much for allowing me to come. I'm coming on behalf of, we have an event that's coming up and it's called the Faith in Blue. So you guys might can Google this, and it's a national event, and this will be the first time that it's happening here in Rockford. And so what it does is that it's going to bridge the gap with the clergy as well as the police officers, because we know that both of those have came up under a lot of attack. But so what our plan is to show them that we can be united for something very, very positive. So we're asking on tonight if you guys could please partner with us and help us. Yes, it is a ticketed event. And what we want to do is we're going to be honoring Carla Red, Theo Glover, and Gary, I cannot pronounce that last name. You guys know? Okay, thank you. And we're going to be honoring them because we want to let them know that we appreciate them and that we have their back. We want to push them on. And so, like I said, it is a ticketed event, so that is why we're coming out asking for you guys to help sponsor, because we don't want the police to have to come and be honored and buy a ticket. The tickets will be $20. And like I said, this is a national event. Please, please, please Google and you'll see it has never happened in Rockford. So we are asking that you would please just jump on board with us, help us, because one thing, when tragedy hit, we called two people. It's either, I know we had a situation in my family, and guess who showed up? Clergy, and guess what? My hairdresser. Nope, the police. That's who showed up. So that is why we want you guys to get behind us, please, and help us with this. And I said once before, and I'm going to say it again before I sit down, I am like the Temptations. I am not too proud to beg. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lori Fleming.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lori Fleming. I am a proud native, born and raised right here in Rockford, Illinois. I first want to start off by saying to the chairman, thank you, thank you, thank you. You were the first person when we told you about this event. You didn't hold back at all. You said, okay, what do we need? That's what I'm talking about. We need more people just like that man right there. I know a lot of you guys don't know, from Lino's. I'm the singing waitress. 25 years I worked there. I'm looking at you all, and I've waited on some of you people. And I just want to say, we're excited about this event. It is a national event. If you Google Faith in Blue, you will find that we are on the national website. It is saying we are honoring Gary Cariana. We are honoring Theo Glover. We are honoring Carla Red. And we have a celebrity recording artist who's a police officer who's on American Got Talent right now. That's what he's on. He's coming to Rockford to celebrate with us. And we're very excited. We need your help. I've never done anything this big. I've been a waitress my whole life, but I was born and raised here. We made national news when all the stabbings took place. We're gonna make national news as we unite our country, one city at a time, starting with Rockford, Illinois.
Thank you. All right, next speaker is Stephanie Hicks. Yeah.
So my name is Stephanie Hicks. I run a nonprofit called Care for Pets. Some of you who have been around a bit are familiar with me. I've not been very active with county leadership so much in the last few years, but we are partnered with Animal Services. We were started by past county leadership about 7 years ago. I'm just here to talk about an event that we're having coming up on August 17th in District 18. We are partnering with the City Council and then also talking to you as well about coming out to this event that we're having. It is for pet owners, but it is at its core to support Winnebago County Animal Services. So this is the cheapest event that we can do that is the most cost effective. I'm not timing me, so if I get buzzed, I'm not offended. Oh, perfect. Okay, perfect. So What we're doing at this event is we're offering vaccinations, and I'm just going to break down what this means to the community. We're serving low-income pet owners who are often subject to citations because they can't afford to get their pets rabies compliant. That also means if their pet is running at large or bites, that it's impounded and it affects capacity at animal services. We're doing microchipping. Again, pet is loose, no microchip, can't go home, goes to animal services, affects capacity, therefore euthanasia. We're offering food support. Again, we're trying to retain pets in their homes. We're also offering core vaccinations to prevent illness. So we get a lot of phone calls, as does animal services, that people's pets are sick and then they need to relinquish them because they can't afford vet care. Otherwise, they're going to get citations also. So we're trying to prevent that. Again, we're affecting capacity and euthanasia animal services, but also helping the pet owners so they're not receiving citations for things that they just can't afford. What else is on that? Spay, neuter. Once we get them through this process, it qualifies them for the county voucher, which we would pay for also, so that they can get their pets altered. Population control obviously also affects shelter population and euthanasia. So we're trying to hit prevention at its core to the at-risk populations that are most affected to capacity issues in animal services, while serving the residents to not have citations when they can't even afford groceries or rent and things of that nature. So you're welcome to come out. We're going to be doing one more this year before the weather turns, and then after that we'll be looking to do them again. We struggled finding a veterinarian to do these in the past, but now we have a vet that we're partnered with. And I also want to thank the chairman because the fees for the tags were reduced in order for us to do this, because we are outside of very small copay, completely subsidizing the cost of the veterinarian, the vaccinations, and all of that stuff. And without lowering the tag fees, we wouldn't be able to afford that. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all our speakers tonight. Okay, next on our agenda is the approval of minutes. May I entertain a motion to approve the June 27th and lay over the July 25th, 2024 minutes. I have a motion by Mr. Webster and a seconded by Mr. McCarthy. Is there any discussion on the approval or the layover? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to the approval or the layover this evening? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Next is the consent agenda, which includes the raffle report and the auditor's report. May I entertain a motion, please? Motion by Ms. Gorel, second by Mr. Hoffman. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to the raffle report or the auditor's report? Very good. Please cast a yes for all members present. There are no appointments to be read in this evening, so we'll move on to reports of standing committees. Tonight is first up is Mr. John Butita for the Finance Committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have just one ordinance this evening, a budget amendment for the Winnebago County Health Department, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Butita. Is there a second by Mr. McDonald? Is there any discussion, Mr. Butita, on this ordinance?
This is just a grant, approval of a grant.
Very good. Any board member discussion on this ordinance? Very good. Are there any board members opposed to this ordinance? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present.
And that'll take care of it.
Thank you, Mr. Butita. Next is the Zoning Committee. Mr. Webster. Thank you, Mr. Webster. Next is Economic Development Committee by Mr. Sweeney.
All right, the Economic Development Committee has one item tonight. That's a resolution granting authority to the Winnebago County Board Chairman to execute the documents necessary to complete a loan for $75,000 from the revolving loan fund to Print Jet Corporation, and I move for its adoption.
Moved by Mr. Sweeney, second by
Ms. Hansard?
Hansard. Oh, why is this microphone on delay? You got quiet on me. Anyway, is there any discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, are any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Thank you.
That does conclude our report. I just want to remind the board that we're at the very end of a budget year. Many of you still have your $1,000 allotments still outstanding, so you have 1 month if you want to do something in this fiscal year.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Next is Operation Administrative Committee, Mr. Keith McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Operations is one item for this evening. It's an amended resolution submitting to the electors by referendum the question of imposing a 1.5% special county retailer's occupation tax for mental health purposes for a period not to exceed 5 years, effective July 1, 2026, for the county of Winnebago, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. McDonald, second by Ms. Hansford, Mr. Thompson, and others. Yes.
Yes, sir. I believe, in my tenure on the board, all resolutions and ordinances of taxes have gone to the Finance Committee. I believe they should be assigned to the Finance Committee.
Okay. Did you hear that, Ms. Vaughn?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so the previous resolution regarding referendum did go to Finance Committee, and then I was advised to send it to Operations, and that's the committee that handled it. And today will be the last day for us to vote on such a question, so.
Is that Mr. Webster?
Send it to Finance? Just a point of order.
Yeah, point of order question. Very good, thank you. Mr. McDonald, any
Yeah.
discussion?
If I may quickly, as I mentioned, this is the amended version of the resolution. So we just had committee. The amendments were to remove John Butita from the sponsor list. And just a couple other areas throughout this resolution that said imposing, and that verbiage has been switched to extending since it is renewing.
And that was done in committee?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Mr. Butita?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we move this resolution back to committee. We only had 5 minutes to discuss this issue, and since this is an issue that's going to involve probably somewhere between $90 to $100 million, I believe that we should move it back to committee for an appropriate period of discussion.
So there's a motion by Mr. Butita to send this back to committee, a second by Mr. Webster. Is there any discussion on that amendment? Yes, Ms. Gorel.
Well, I believe it's because we aren't starting a new resolution. We are only asking to extend it. This has already been approved, been through financing the first time. This time, all it's asking is that we extend it and nothing else. And that's probably why it didn't go to financing, because it's the same everything as it was before. It's just like amending it is all it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gorel. Yes, Ms. Crosby.
Just a point of order. Our council indicated that this is the last day we can vote on this, and so I just need a clarification of that.
Thank you, Ms. Crosby.
Thank you, Chairman. So the final date to submit the question and to certify it is August 19th, which is a Monday. So this is the last county board meeting before that date,
Thank you.
unless we have a special meeting before then.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Mr. Webster first.
Yeah, thank you. If I'm not mistaken, this could be put on the ballot in the spring as well. So, unless I'm mistaken. Am I?
Ms. Vaughn?
I was advised to draft a resolution for the November ballot. If the county board would like to wait, it can wait until next year.
And
But-
follow up, and I would be in favor of that. And I'm in favor of sending it back to finance as well. You know, a couple of the main duties of the county board are both fiduciary and legislative. That's everything we deal with generally falls under one of those two columns. This one kind of falls underneath both of them. So under fiduciary obligations we have towards the taxpayer, that's one of the main things we're here for, to see where the money is going, how that money is being spent, so forth. And so I think there's been questions in the past about how things, how the money is doled out. And this is one of those huge instances, because we're talking about millions upon millions of dollars. And I would really like to see how they've all been spent in the past and how the intent is to move forward about spending.
Thank you. So we had Mr. Butita, then we'll move through.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. So Ms. Vaughn is accurate that in order to place the issue on the November ballot, it would have to pass tonight. But I would claim that as of August 1st, the mental health fund was at $36 million. And in 2023, the mental health board spent $11 million. And as of August 1st this year, the mental health board has spent $9 million, 2 months to go in this fiscal year. So they had budgeted $18 million. They're not going to get anywhere close to that. So the odds of us having a surplus in the excess of $40 million is about, at their current rate of spending, about 3 years of revenue. So I'm not sure what the rush is to get this on the ballot and why we can't have an appropriate discussion about it.
Thank you, sir. I think I saw Mr. Sweeney's hand, and then I'll come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I also have to respectfully disagree with a couple of my colleagues here in that what we, even if we could wait another term or another year or two to put this on the ballot, if there's one more opportunity to do it, whether we should do that is a separate question. And I think that in light of the fact that in 2018, the voters of this county overwhelmingly voted to enact a mental health tax in this community because of how badly it is needed. And so as far as our fiduciary responsibility goes, we don't have that anymore. That is governed by a board that the chairman makes nominations and this board confirms or denies. That board has the fiduciary responsibility ultimately for that money. The job of this board at this point, per the law in this state, is to ask the voters whether or not they do or don't want this tax to exist. And I see it as my job as a board member. It's in fact, in my opinion, job of this body to be able to enact ballot referendums to ask the voters about a renewal of this tax. That's how it was put on the ballot the first time. Now, as far as who sits on that board, that's a conversation that many of us have had, and I am a person that is more than okay with change on that board. That's our job, though, to do it from that way. Not how the money is spent is out of our control, but the semantics of what committee it did or didn't go through at this point in the game, I don't think that should be used as an excuse to deny the voters the ability to approve or disapprove this tax with some advance, so the entities that receive money and future entities that might receive money from this tax will have time to be able to anticipate for their revenue. If we wait to the last minute, it's a yes or no, like that no one's gonna know till the last minute right before the sunset. I think that the voters wanted it. It's good policy to ask the question now with some advance notice so that people have time to prepare for whatever the answer is by the people in this county. And I hope that we approve it to be on the ballot tonight.
Thank you. I think I saw Ms. Crosby, then Mr. Neighbors, Ms. Gorel. Ms. Crosby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I concur with Mr. Sweeney. The whole purpose behind a referendum is to provide our constituents choice and to have it be short stopped by a few members of the board or all 20 of us. It's a great disservice to our community and those that depend on us to offer the opportunity for our constituents to choose whether they want to do this or not. So I'm opposed to sending it back to any committee. I fully support the tax, and I believe that our constituents and individuals within our community have enough sense and ability and maturity to decide whether they want to move forward with this or not, and it's up to them. I've said enough.
Thank you, Ms. Crosby. Mr. Neighbors.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sweeney and Ms. Crosby said it real nicely that we can't behoove the voters a chance to make this opportunity. We know that the election is coming up soon. We need to give the people opportunity to make the decision, whether the proper time to make the decision in this election. Also, we need to give the Mental Health Board the proper time. Doing this a year in advance give us the proper time to know what we're going to do in the future. Right now, we put out a 4-year for another strategic plan, and if we don't put this on the ballot and it doesn't get approved by the voters, then we need to know what we need to do from here on. That's why we need to put it on the ballot in November versus the spring, so we can have proper time to know what we want to do in the future. So so when November vote comes, say if it's yes, we know we can continue on with our plans. If it's no, then we know how to back up out of the service plan. So that's why it's on. That's why it needs to go on the ballot now. And the other thing is, I did an interview this morning, and I told them how much support that the whole board has for this tax. And here and now, I feel like my colleagues are letting me down when telling the people on the news that we're all for it. And it seems like I don't expect any gains. They asked me personally that, like, do you expect anything to stop it? And now I hear, all this confusion when we talked about this for 2 weeks, and it sounds like political games being played just because one person doesn't want this on the ballot. And he took his name off the referendum. So I would appreciate you to be fair to the voters and let them decide instead of you deciding for the whole county. Thank you.
Ms. Gorel and Ms. Hansert.
Thank you. We also, the county has also, over all the years that it's been in existence, has been here for the health and welfare of the residents of Winnebago County. And you would do them a big injustice by not putting this on the ballot now and let people decide what they want to do. That money isn't our money to begin with. It came from the state tax, and it isn't our money. And why some of our members of this board don't understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, that money that you have in reserve right now, is it not for those who who apply for the grant, complete what they're supposed to do, and then get the money? Is that not how it works? It's not given to them first. It's given to them after they perform and go along. So that money isn't anyone's but the people who have applied for the grants if they do what they're supposed to do and turn in all their reports on how they did it. Why people don't understand, I don't know. We've talked this over and over again about how grants work. They aren't handouts. You got to do it first before you get it. So, and remember, we are in charge of the health and welfare of this county. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gorel. Ms. Hansert, did you have your hand up? Okay, I'll go back to Mr. Arena and then Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to speak to the question of why this year, the election in November is the opportunity to have it before the largest number of voters for anticipated voter turnout. There is no qualifying election in 2025, to put it on the ballot, and then the only time to put it on the ballot in 2026 would be the primary ballot, where they would expect lower voter turnout. That being said, I don't think we should think about this as kind of an absolute all or nothing, it lives or it dies. Say it goes to the voters this November and it fails, and then for some reason we didn't have it back on the ballot in 2026, at any time we could come back to the voters and reimpose the tax after we sort out whatever issues exist with the operation of the mental health board. And also, by getting voter approval to impose the tax, we're not locking people in, citizens who might have reservations, because again, it says here that, and the same language exists now, this county board can repeal this tax at any time. So if in November the voters decide, yes, extend the tax, and then 2 years from now, for some reason, the public sentiment changes and there's a desire not to have the tax, we still have the power to control that. So I don't think that we should make this decision in terms of that it's an absolute all or nothing. So beyond that, I just want to then comment on the point Mr. Neighbor make. I respect him as a board member, and I know his commitment to the functions of the Mental Health Board. I know, even though I personally think the tax is necessary, that the county needs to have funds available and services available to its citizens for mental health purposes, I think that I disagree with things that the Mental Health Board does, how the money's being spent, maybe in the programs that they are funding, things that they aren't doing, and the administrative costs that they're consuming with the mental health tax. That can still be addressed even with the tax being on the ballot, and even if the voters, again, reimpose the tax. I think that activity by this board needs to be ongoing, that we're consistently paying attention to what this board's doing. Our control over this tax is strictly in the appointment of board members. The state has stepped in and made this money pass through our budget. So we don't have any discretion over how much of the money is given to the Mental Health Board. It all goes to them. They decide how it's being spent, but we still have this control over who those board members are. And I think right now is a time when we need to exercise some of that control, and we need to look for maybe some different perspectives on that board. And again, I just want to leave by saying, I myself think that the tax is needed, and I personally will be voting to extend it, although I respect and agree with a lot of the concerns that Mr. Butita has raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arena. Mr. Thompson has a hand up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're here for a reason, and that is to represent our constituents. So it's important that we get voter input on this mental health tax. And I also believe that there should be services available for the mentally challenged. I feel that if we withhold putting this referendum on the ballot for this upcoming election, then that's going to increase the possibility of maybe another stabbing incident like the one that happened this past March. So I'll be voting for putting this referendum on the ballot for two reasons. One, so that we get voter input on whether they want to do another mental health tax, and to help to get funds for the mental health services to those who need it the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. So Mr. Lindmark, and then Ms. Crosby, and then Mr. Penny.
So I'm 100% for the mental health tax. I run a foundation for mental health for first responders. It's part of my passion. I was, for this campaign, I advertised for the original tax. It is so needed in this county. And we need to go even further than what it's supplying, but it needs to get on the ballot. I will be voting yes for it to be on the ballot. But we need to be accountable for the taxpayers' money they put in. Where are some of these fees? We've asked for the fees. I personally asked for them and haven't got them. I think the taxpayers have a right to know that. But with that said, I'm still 100% behind this. But let's be transparent with the taxpayers' money and let them know where all these fees are going. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindmark. I'm going to go to Ms. Crosby and then Mr. Penny.
I just did a quick search, and if we're going to vote on this again and we postpone, it has to be a general election either in November or in a primary that is countywide. So it's not next spring, it is the spring of '26. So with that, I call the question.
So Ms. Crosby has called the question. I'm going to honor that. So what we're going to do is do a roll call. Oh, was there a second? No second? I thought I saw a hand go up. No. Yes, but I thought I saw the second hand pop up. Ms. Hansard? There's discussion or not? No discussion on that. Okay. All in favor? Call the question, say aye. Opposed? No. Roll call, please.
Didn't hear it. Okay, and this is?
To end the discussion.
Question. Mr. Webster? Mr. Arena? Mr. Booker? Mr. Butita? Mrs. Crosby?
No going back to committee, correct?
This is on call the
Calling the
question.
question.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Dean's confused once again. I vote
Thank you.
Mrs. Gorel?
Yes.
Ms. Hansard? Mr. Hoffman? Mr. Lindmark? Mr. McCarthy? Mr. McDonald?
No.
Mr. Neighbors? Mr. Penny? Mr. Salgado? Mr. Scroll? Mr. Sweeney? Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Chairman, that's 8 yes, 9 no, and 3 board members absent.
So the motion to call the question has failed. So Mr. Penny.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this, and I've been torn the entire week, and I've heard now some very good arguments on the floor. And my only concern is kind of twofold. It's a concern and a statement. Clearly, there's multiple people that don't have enough information. It's easy to say we all support mental health. We've had a lot of questions just in my tenure on the board, and I think they were reasonable questions that maybe didn't get answered or didn't get thoroughly sought out. However, my challenge to the Mental Health Board moving forward is to either build a better relationship with the board and understand that we want, I think we all, and I'm going to just speak on my behalf, want to be partners with the board, want to be in alliance with the board to make sure that our community is getting the help that it needs. And I agree to an extent with Ms. Gorel. It's not our money, but it is the taxpayers' money. And we do have a duty to overlook, to oversee, and make sure that those funds are being either used properly or maximized properly. And if they're not being maximized, that means they're not being used. And so I think we have an ongoing duty to at least question the status quo and make sure that we're helping as many people in the community as possible. I don't have a problem supporting it. My challenge in the future is I hope that the board at least reaches out to the county board, asks for support, keeps us in the light and the loop on what is going to be coming down the pipeline, and not have it just show up and say, hey, today's the last day, we got to get it on the ballot. That's a little disappointing. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Penny. Mr. Webster?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for your comments there, Mr. Penny. Backing up, there's no one here that is not in favor of supporting mental health. Let's get that out in the front right now. But, as Mr. Penny just mentioned to you, what I mentioned earlier, we do have a responsibility to look out for the taxpayer's dollar. And so it's going to the Mental Health Board, yes. But here we are discussing our involvement with the Mental Health Board in one way or another. So by extension, we do have a fiduciary responsibility. So what we've been talking about here, and some have alluded to the fact here, and I think Mr. Utita pointed out that there's like a $36 million surplus. These things need to be thought about too. Is that enough money, or is it too much money? Whatever, but I think I'm glad that we had this opened up for more discussion, because I think others have maybe some thoughts in their head there too, if they think about this, but I'm adamant that we need to be looking out for the taxpayer's dollar in one way or another. And as far as this resolution goes, I would please like to remove my name as a sponsor on there. Fully in favor of supporting this. I was at the beginning, and I am now, but not at the levels that we're talking about, and really not the time frame either. So between now and the next election, when it could be voted on, there's a lot of money there to work with still, and they will still be garnering that amount of money every year. When this was first put in to effect there back in 2020, it was garnering $18 million per year. That was the goal, for $18 million per year. So we're here talking about having a lot of money on a surplus right now, and they're still going to wind up getting $18 million a year for the next, I don't know how many years, whether we vote on this tonight or not. That's my point. So for having an open and honest discussion, I'm all for that. And I appreciated what Tim said earlier. Tim's spot on a lot of things that he's saying there. Angie was too. Most of the comments in here were important comments to us, timely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Mr. Neighbors and Ms. Gorel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to speak again. One thing, when it comes to it being in the Finance Committee, I know that was the original thing. And I did bring up the question, it should go back to the Finance Committee. And I was told that it's supposed to go into operations this time. So, and that's totally fine with me. And, you know, I did agree with that going to the Finance Committee at first. The other thing is, I keep hearing everybody say it's a $36 million surplus. It is not a $36 million surplus. All that money was budgeted and allocated to all the people that applied for it. Now, all the people that applied for it didn't use all the money. So we can't just say it was a surplus if the people in the program didn't use the money that they budgeted for. So that's how the money keeps going back to the mental health fund. We're not just giving the money away. They have to complete the program. So if they ask for $1.2 million, and then at the end of the fiscal year, they only sent receipts for $900,000, then the rest of that money stays with the Mental Health Board. So they can get the whole budget. We even made budget extensions for people needing budget amendments for people that needed more money. But everyone's not using all the money that they receive. that they ask for, mainly because they can't find the clinicians to come and work in the city of Rockford or Winnebago County. Now, we developed a program between Crusader Clinic and the University of Illinois so we could grow our own clinicians and mental health service providers. So that's been budgeted in this year also. So this is a new tax. This is young. So we're still working the kinks out without, at the same time, being fiscally responsible, not just throwing the money away. That way, when we find those programs that are great and can keep going, we still have the money in the future to give to those great programs. And then when the money is not, when the programs that aren't using it, they don't get the money because they didn't prove that their program was good enough. So it's not just that it's a surplus in there. We're trying to find the great programs and utilize that money to the best of our ability. The CCRT program is a great program. That's probably one of the best programs that we got in there, and it helps the police, and it helps keep the population of the jail down, just with the CCRT program alone. And then the other program, the Crusader Clinic program. People with low income are able to come to Crusader Clinic and get physical health services along with the mental health services. So the money is being spent properly and utilized fairly and responsible, in my personal opinion, because we're making sure the programs that utilize the money get the money and do great with the money, and the programs that don't, if their program isn't using all the money, they don't get it, and it may go to a better program in the future. So it's not just a $36 million surplus in there. They just didn't use the money to what they said they were going to use it for.
Thank you, Mr. Neighbors. Is there any board members who have not spoken who want to speak? Ms. Gorel, you're last.
Oh, I got to remember what I was going to say. The thing is, I don't think you realize that to get this committee to begin with, it took us 10 years. We worked with the health department. I was on the committee. I chaired the committee, trying to find an easy way of doing this because we were the only county, big county in Illinois that did not have any provisions for mental health. And so working on this, we looked at every angle of how to raise money. And it all came back to doing like a levy on the taxpayer. Keep that in mind. Many of the counties tax their residents for this type of a mental health board. And that's when we figured out that if we did the 0.5%, everyone would share in it, taxpayer or no taxpayer. And yet, if you go online, and if you read the information that's been given out to you in the booklets that they have made, and who they have serviced, how many people, our health, in today's, on my computer, the city of Rockford, McNamara, had a wonderful saying. They put out like a little newsletter about what this Winnebago County Health Department has accomplished and how pleased they are with it, because the city has been able to take advantage of it. The county, our deputies, our sheriff, everyone's been able to take, our judiciary, talk to them about it, how much money they've gotten out of this particular Winnebago County mental health. You have no idea what it takes to do that. And you guys keep thinking, and I hope you understood what Tim said. If that money is sitting there, it goes back after. If we were to shut it down, it goes back to the state. We don't keep that money.
No, it still goes to the program.
It goes to the program. But if we don't have programs, let's say we don't have the mental health board anymore, where does the money go? It goes back to the state. The county's not going to get it.
Thank you, Ms. Gorel. I'm going to
Did a
go
lot
to
of research on this.
Mr. Salgado hasn't spoken yet. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to apologize to LAFA because it kind of seems like they're going at you and saying, why was this brought forward? It was brought to the committee. Someone brought it. They had a conversation, whether it's Regional Plan 1 or the board of the Mental Health Board. They said, hey, this is what we'd like to do. Discussions were being held. So it's frustrating for me because we see it all the time, you know. I don't know what it is, if we're afraid to pull the trigger, if it's political, not political. I guess it's pretty straightforward, right? So we've seen it with River Bluff. We've seen it with, you know, the commission of the election, you know, with Mr. Guevara trying to put something through. Everything's going to be controversial one way or the other. I do lean heavily with Sweeney's statements. You know, he's absolutely correct from my standpoint. That's how I view it. I'm not here to micromanage those departments. I'm here to oversee them. If there are issues, obviously I'm going to step in and represent my constituents and the citizens and the taxpayers for that perspective. We've had ample time over and over in Finance Committee and different committees having them come in and present. Last time, if you recall, we had the treasurer come, right? She was an attorney, if you guys remember. She presented the expenditures. Sure, she didn't have the invoices with her, whatever the case may be. If there was follow-up, I don't know. The simple question that I always ask is, I've worked in not-for-profit, and I've explained this to many of you guys, you know, what's your operating cost, administrative cost? You know, typically on a ballpark figure, it's 10%. 9 to 10% is what goes to administrative cost. I asked Mr. Mike Dunn Jr. to give me that number, what that was. It's 4.5 to 6%. From my perspective, you know, I'm comfortable with those margins, right? Now, if I do have questions that, hey, you know, marketing is $250,000, $300,000, what are they doing? You know, I want to know exactly what's going on. You can ask those questions, right? And so they had multiple opportunities to do that. And I know we have a board member too that sits on that board. We have questions, concerns. We need to talk to that board member and make sure that he's relaying the information back to the mental health board. So to Mr. Sweeney's point, I brought this up to Mr. Arena and some other folks. I said, our process that we have and our authority to make changes internally or whatever the structure of, and to my bad, because, you know, it kind of seems like we're trying to set the role so the shift goes, is looking at the composite of the board. We have the authority. The chairman has the authority to appoint those individuals. That's a form that you can have some sort of control to make sure if you're not satisfied, whatever the case may be. But from my perspective, they've had ample time over and over. They've given you the flyer, whatever the nice, I call it the expensive pamphlet that they do with the bar charts and how they address the different pieces of the mental health and break out who they gave, you know, which agency they gave how much money and what are they doing. They come out with that. So from my perspective, you know, they've come out here from that perspective. But to my point, an argument to the referendum, I don't, you know, from what I'm hearing, Ms. Crosby, Mr. Arena is saying that it's going to have to be in 2026 in the primary, right? That's my understanding, correct, for 2026. So, you know, from that aspect of it, lower voter turnout, and we want to make sure. And if everybody has a problem with it, that they're not doing a great job, well, guess what? The public is going to feel the same way, and they're probably going to vote it down. I'm assuming, right? There's going to be both sides. There's going to be campaigns saying, no, you know, we don't need it. They're not spending it as much as they should. They're not allocating these kind of funding or whatever the case may be. So I wouldn't be as concerned if my perception is they're not doing a great job facilitating whatever the case may be. I could be wrong. I think, you know, it's needed. I pushed it when I was finance chair at that time. It went through. So that's my perspective. But I just don't like the fact that we put it on, we take it off, and then we're rushing to get things and trying to get clarification, and then to say, hey, let's just stall. You know, I don't know what the fear is from this perspective, right? Some say, well, it's 40 million, it's 30 million, you know, it's a lot of money out there in the reserve, whatever they have. You know, the taxpayers, if they feel they have enough, are going to vote it down. If they feel they have too much money and why should we be giving them more money, they're going to vote that down. So that's all I'm saying. I think we need to vote on this today, get it over with, and let the voters decide what they want to do. And as, you know, some of the folks have said, sure, we can continue to work with Mr. Neighbors or whoever the next board member is that's part of that, and the members of the Mental Health Board to strain it out and hopefully get the answers that we need the way we want it. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are any board members who have not spoken that want to speak, I'm ready to call the vote. Mr. Arena, do you have something more to value to bring? Okay.
I have a procedural question. So to the point that Mr. Butita made about the committee, which committee was appropriate, is it that, the question is just because it's a ballot question related to taxes, it should go to finance? Like, is that explicit in our rules that which committee should have had it, or is it just up to discretion?
Thank you, Chairman. Our ordinance just says to the appropriate committee, based on the last time it was up in 2020. That's why I originally drafted it to go to Finance Committee. So no, there's no specific line item to say this should go to Finance, but it is involving taxes.
Other ballot questions go through operations, right?
The River Bluff one did go to Operations.
Okay, so it's not unprecedented, because I'm asking this just to make sure that it's not necessary for us to have some type of suspension of rules to make it all legal, but it sounds to me like this was just a matter of discretion, and it was decided to be done this way.
Correct, and ultimately the final vote is the full county board, so.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure. And so the vote that we're going to take next is whether or not it's being sent back to committee, not a vote actually.
Yep, Mr. Butita's motion is to send it back to committee.
Right, thank you.
There's a second in discussion. Anything more to add, Ms.? Make it quick, please. I'm going to call the question.
First of all, let's remember this is for all of Winnebago County. It's just not for the certain municipalities. It's for all of Winnebago County to pay this tax. But how many people come into Winnebago County and spend money? They are also paying this half-a-cent tax. It isn't divided about who you are or what you are. You're going to pay it anyway. And I don't care if it's a kid that's getting a bottle of pop will pay a tax on it, or if it's somebody buying a nice new car that we're going to get the tax on. So it's, you know, it's spread all over the place. It's not one individual or one taxpayer or only the people who have real estate. It's for everyone, no matter who you are, what you are. That's where the tax is, a half a cent. Come on, guys. You know, why are we going through all this for a half a cent?
Thank you, Ms. Goro.
Thank you.
Clerk Gumaho, can you call the roll for the vote, please?
Okay, and you want to clarify what we're voting on?
Yes, Mr. Butita's motion, and there was a second to send this
To send back.
back to committee. So a yes sends it back to committee, a no keeps it on the floor here, and we move on.
Thank you,
for a
Chairman.
vote.
We will start with Mr. Arena.
No.
Mr. Booker.
No.
Mr. Butita.
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby. Mrs. Gorel. Ms. Hansert. Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Lindmark. Mr. McCarthy. Mr. McDonald.
No.
Mr. Neighbors. Mr. Penny. Mr. Salgado. Mr. Scroll. Mr. Sweeney.
No.
Mr. Thompson. Mr. Webster. Chairman, that's 2 yes, 15 no, and 3 absent.
Thank you. The motion has failed. So now on the floor, we have the original motion. Mr. Butita.
Okay, thank you all. I'll be brief. So, first of all, I want to make absolutely clear. I am in favor of the tax for the first time. I'm not in favor of the process. I think the discussion we've had tonight it proves my point that this conversation shouldn't happen at the committee level. Whoever made the decision or orchestrated Salgado's point that if we had a $40 million balance, let the voters decide if it's up or down. Well, that was my fear. A year ago at the budget committee, or the budget meeting in September, I warned this board of the same thing. I brought the issue up of the fund, mental health board fund balance. And I warned that if we continue down this path, that once we get to a referendum, the voters are going to potentially look at this and be discouraged. So, I mean, we're in essence, and I'll have to disagree with Tim, that there was $18 million budget this year, probably going to spend about $12 million. So the fund balance is going to be close to $40 million. It's money that stays in the fund, can be appropriated again, but the history of is that the funds are only being spent at about $11 or $12 million a year. In any event, there's been $70 million collected through the end of fiscal 24 for this mental health fund. And about 50 cents, 51 cents out of every dollar has gone directly to a program, mental health program. The balance has gone to either administrative or sits in the fund balance. My fear, as Mr. Salgado said, is that the voters are going to look not kindly on this. They're going to say, why should we vote in favor of a fund or a tax it? They've already got more money. So at the current spending level of $12 million a year, there's probably 3 years worth of revenue sitting right there with more taxes to be collected through 2025. So I would urge everybody to make that consideration. I wish we could have done this at the committee level. I think we could have ironed out a lot of this out. I believe it would have been appropriate for the mental health board to talk to the board members and make their presentation. Other advocates of this tax could have also come forward. Other experts in the mental health area could have given their 2 cents. I think the public would have been well served. And just one closing statement. This is not a political move on my part. As you can see, all my friends are going the other direction. This is just something that I felt that was good governance, and it's my own personal opinion, and serves no political purpose at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butita. So Mr. McDonald has made a motion to approve this resolution, and there was a second. I can't recall who, but there was a second. That's still on the floor. So is there any discussion on approving the resolution? Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on Mr. Butita's comments and the assertion that there's politics at play here, and I don't think that exists at all. It's not a new conversation for this board about how the money's being spent and on the question of administrative expenses by the mental health board. To Mr. Salgado's point, their treasurer did come to finance and talked about the expenses, and there's been percentages given on what they're spending in administrative costs, and that's the cost they're incurring just to decide who they give money to. During that finance committee meeting, the treasurer was asked, what are the administrative costs down the line in terms of giving services to the end recipient? And she was not able to provide that information, and that information was never given. So we don't know what the grant recipients are consuming in administrative costs before the individuals in need are being helped. That's part of the concern. This mental health board currently is spending $2,300 every day in labor costs just to decide who to give the money to. And I think that that's enough money that we need to have very specific answers about how that's being used. Beyond that, there's other questions about things they are doing and things they are not doing that I think we deserve answers to. But even though I'm going to vote now, that put this on the ballot, and the voters should be able to weigh in on this, that doesn't stop our work in getting answers to those questions. And those efforts are going to continue by myself and by other members of this board. And, you know, I don't want Mr. Butita to feel like he's on an island, because I agree with everything he's saying. I just think that ultimately, when given the choice between not putting it on the ballot and giving the voters the opportunity to weigh in, I've been swayed by those who've argued that voters should have the right to weigh in. Thank you.
Mr. Lindmark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Arena brought up the point that I was going to make. $2,300 a day for administration fees for what? We cannot get an answer on that. I've asked, others have asked, we can't get an answer on it. To me, when I campaigned for this tax, and I will again, as long as we can get answers to some of these questions, was not going to just funnel money to administration fees. The administration fees have almost doubled every year. Yeah, you can talk about percentages, but there's a lot of money there, which brings that percentage down when we're talking about the total balance or the total amount coming in. Of course, the percentage is going to be lower. Thank you.
Mr. Lindmark? Mr. McCarthy, did you have your hand up?
Yes, just real briefly, I concur with what Mr. Arena just said. Same with Mr. Lindmark. We need to know exactly where this money's going towards. I'm going to be voting yes to get this on a ballot and let the people vote come November. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Neighbors?
I keep hearing the board members alluding to that the $2,300 only goes to picking who gets the money. That's not the case. They have to manage each grant. They have to deal with each program. So that takes hours of work. It's 36 programs that they have to talk to on a weekly basis. It's not just saying, okay, you get this money. They have to read the grant, verify their budget, verify this and that, and then throughout the process, they have to manage those programs to make sure they're doing what they say they do. So I don't know why you keep alluding to that they only getting paid just to figure out who gets what. That's the board's decision to figure out who gets what, and we do that for free.
Thank you. Mr. Salgado?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to follow up on Mr. Butita. He's absolutely correct. I had the same questions when the treasurer came in. What are you guys going to do a year come 5, you know, when the referendum is coming? Got all these resource constraints, the money's not out there. You know, I asked that question, what are you guys doing? And I've told Mr. Neighbors, you guys better be prepared to have those answers, because the voters are gonna talk about that. I have no problem whatsoever posing the question. You know, if they do their job that they're supposed to do it, we see it in the community, there's an impact, you know, the citizens are gonna recognize that. If they don't, they're gonna go the opposite way. If it's all about the money, they're gonna say, you know what, 40 million's too much. You know, I could do something else. The sheriff could receive it. The health department could receive it, whatever the case may be. Those are valid questions, right? But the community is gonna decide that, not me, that I think, you know, the 40 million should go to here, over there. The community, if they see the impact, they're gonna have that decision on the ballot, right? And I think the community is smart enough to decipher between, you know, money versus whatever the case may be. At that point, they're gonna make the decision. I think they're that intelligent to make that decision. That's my fear as well. You know, I've expressed this to Mr. Neighbors, said your committee needs to, you know, figure this out, because if that sunset clause takes effect and it doesn't get renewed, what are you guys gonna do with the different programs and everything, the impact that you're having in the community? So those are valid questions. I agree with them 100%. From my perspective, you know, I've had conversations where the money comes in, and Mr. Neighbors is correct. There's overhead costs, there's accounting, there's legal, there's everything that goes into it is an operating cost, right? It's not just one person receiving $2,700 or whatever it is a day for 365 days, right? So there's a lot that goes in administrative costs. They've tried to break it down for us. I'm not defending them, you know. Could they decide, I think marketing cost or for a website, you know, if they're spending $150,000, I don't know if I really would agree with that, right? But maybe there's a rationale for it, right? And so those are the questions that we can ask, but we can't just assume that it's very expensive to have operating cost. And, you know, there's a reason, once again, I hate to be the guy that, you know, brings up the 10%, 9%, but there's a purpose because there's reporting that has to go out. There has to be all that aspect of it. So who's gonna run the program itself, right? And who's gonna manage to make sure, like Mr. Neighbor is saying, you know, that they're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing versus just taking our money and that's it, right? So there's that operating piece of it, right, from my perspective. Now, you know, from my perspective of the 40 million is too much, you know, we'll see. The voters will make that decision. I'll be sad. I'll be really sad if it goes away. But, you know, to their end, you know, if they had an impact in the community is gonna be out there pushing it for it. If not, they're gonna vote no on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salgado. Mr. Lindmark, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just briefly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand what administration does. I understand they have to follow up. I hope they have been. But $2,300 a day is a lot of money. We've asked for details on the money, have received nothing. Why is that? Nobody can answer that. I know, I run an organization. I know it takes time, effort, and hours to run it. Just give the information where it's going, and I pray to God this tax does pass again because it is so needed, but I'd like to see the information on $2,300 a day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindmark. Is there any further discussion on this resolution? Going once? All right, Clerk Gummel, can you please call the roll?
I'd love to. We'll start with Mr. Booker. Mr. Butita. Mrs. Crosby. Mrs. Gorel. Ms. Hansard. Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Lindmark. Mr. McCarthy. Mr. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Neighbors. Mr. Penny. Mr. Salgado. Mr. Scroll. Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Thompson. Mr. Webster. Mr. Arena. Mr. Chairman, 15 yes, 2 no, and 3 absent.
Very good. The resolution has been approved. A question will be placed on the ballot. Mr. McDonald, you still with us?
Yeah, next time I want to bring a chair. We need to have a chair up here, and I'm about to go on a restroom break. But we spent almost an hour talking about this lively discussion. I appreciate you guys putting it up. We obviously have work to do, but I appreciate all the conversation on both sides tonight. Thank you very much for your patience on that.
Thank you,
Concludes
Mr.
the report.
McDonald. Okay, we have Public Works Committee. Is there anybody representing Public Works that want to report anything? If not, no report. Public Safety and Judiciary Committee, Mr. Lindmark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No report.
No report. Legislative Lobbying Committee, Mr. Salgado.
I'll be brief, Chairman, hopefully here. So the Legislative Lobbying Committee has one resolution today. It's a resolution authorizing the Winnebago County Board Chairman to execute a professional services agreement by and between the Ferguson Group, TFG, and the County of Winnebago for grant writing services, and I so move.
Moved by Mr. Salgado, second by Mr. Sweeney and Ms. Hansard and others. Is there any discussion, Mr. Salgado?
Yeah, just real quick, this is just an extension of TFG. This is a $60,000 appropriation for grants supporting various departments, training on grant writing, reviewing the grants on that aspect of it. So that's pretty much what we're voting on here today.
Very good. Any board member discussion on this resolution? Hearing none, are there any board members opposed to this resolution? Very good. Please cast yes for all members present. Mr. Salgado?
Just real briefly, we are We had a strategic meeting with our federal lobbyist, Group. We are having them come in potentially in September, so be on the lookout for the renewal of their contract and obviously their updates on that. So just something to be made aware of.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Salgado.
That concludes our report.
Thank you. I believe we did finance, didn't that question? Okay, yep. Okay, unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business this evening in front of the board? Okay, new business in front of the board this evening. New business? Nope. Announcement and communications from our clerk, Lori Gummow.
Thank you, Chairman. The items listed below were received as correspondence.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. Winnebago County Fair starts next week, the 14th, out in Pecatonica.
And I heard Mr. McCarthy's going to be riding the bull.
Well, being in politics, I think we're all riding the bull.
The bull or the barrel.
Or I also heard Mr. Arena's going to be in the dunk tank. Anybody else want to participate? So just to remind everybody, right after we adjourn this meeting, we're going to convene the committee of the whole meeting, so don't go any potty breaks. Just kidding. Motion to adjourn? Mr. Webster, seconded by Mr. Thompson. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is for the Committee of the Whole. Please call the roll.
Thank you, Chairman. We'll start with Mr. Butita. Does everybody run for?
Just go. He'll come back. We got enough.
I'll come back around. Ms. Crosby. Ms. Fellers. Mrs. Gorel. Mr. Gravera. Ms. Hansert. Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Lindmark. Mr. McCarthy. Mr. McDonald. Mr. Neighbors. Mr. Penny. Come back around. Mr. Salgado. Mr. Scroll. Mr. Swinney. Mr. Tassoni. Is absent. Mr. Thompson. Thank you, Mr. Webster. Mr. Arena. Mr. Booker. And we will confirm Mr. Butita.
Easy. Mr. Sweeney.
Mr. Penny. Calling Mr. Penny. Calling Mr. Penny. Mr. Sweeney. Are we counting Mr. Penny? Are we counting Mr. Penny?
Here he is.
Mr. Penny? Thank you, Mr. Penny. Chairman, 17 board members present, 3 board members absent.
Very good. We have a quorum. Is there any public comment this evening? Anybody signed up for public comment? No public comment on this. We have a budget presentation by our own Steve Schultz, our CFO. Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to kick this off by giving my sense of great gratitude to Molly Terranoni, Ross Chapman, the elected offices, the department leaders that were all instrumental in a huge amount of work. What you have in front of you is a 300-page document and represents months of effort. And so for all that have been involved in that, I just want to express my gratitude. Thank you very much. So we have, you're familiar with the fact that our 2 main operating funds are the general fund and the public safety sales tax fund. And so many of the pages in the document in front of you are the detail related to the general fund and the public safety sales tax fund. As you get further back in the document, you get into the variety of other fees that are available to the various elected offices, the highway funds, the tort funds, Social Security, the health insurance fund, the bond funds, and there are quite a variety of these, and we have to track the funds separately. That's why we have all the funds that we do. I understand that it's a daunting document in front of you. It's at 300 pages. It's challenging. I would suggest that the general fund, the public safety sales tax fund are the ones that deserve the majority of your time. However, I am appreciative of those of you that actually make your way gradually through the entire book, because there's meaning and significance to the others as well. Just focusing on the highlights, I know this is hard to read, and I'll make sure that we distribute this PowerPoint via email so that you'll have the ability to review it afterwards. But some of the significant items, you folks are familiar with the fact that we only increased the levy by a small amount. That's just for the new growth. And you can imagine when you have a significant funding source that is losing ground to inflation annually, that ends up making a significant difference, especially over time. And so we're impacted by that. We needed to, by statute, increase the levy for the veterans. We've done that. We needed to allocate dollars to the Social Security Fund because with all the new hires that we've done and with inflationary increases in salaries, there's a burden to the Social Security Fund where we needed to increase the amount was going into that from the levy. We were able to do a small increase to the general fund as well. We're continuing the increased funding for the highway department and the 3 levies that relate to them. So we carried that from last year to this year. It's a $1.4 million increase that we did last year. We retained that. We also increased, again, the River Bluff levy. The largest increase was last year. The tort fund has been challenging for us, and so we had to maintain a large allocation from the levy to the tort fund. We have a large temporary decrease in the IMRF portion of the levy. And I say temporary because we have a substantial balance, if you'll see if you page back to the IMRF fund, but that is a temporary large balance because we're spending a significant chunk of that this year. We've seen a reduction in the revenue because of the Safety Act. We have also seen improved revenue from multiple sources. As we've had inflation, we have the benefit of the cost of those goods and services going up. To the extent that they go up, the sales tax on those services and on those goods also goes up. We've also had an increase in our state income tax a few years ago, and we're beneficiaries of that. We have a large reduction in the personal property replacement tax. It's something I've brought up to the Finance Committee numerous times now, so it's a known issue. We had 2 great years that were outsized in terms of very large amounts to the good. But now this year we've fallen back to earth. It's a substantial reduction from last year, and the state is telling us we're going to see another 10% reduction next year. In addition to that, some of the PPRT funds go to the IMRF fund and also to the Social Security Fund, which have greater demands as we have increased salaries. We also have an increase in our scheduled bond payments. So for this year and next year, we have a substantial increase in our bond payments. The good news is that after fiscal year 26, there's going to be a reduction in the bond payment schedule. We have net operating deficit, and the bulk of the deficit that we have in both the general fund and the public safety sales tax is related to the SIP plan. And we have the regular SIP 25 plan for those annual items in this upcoming fiscal year. But we also, for the first time in our history, have a long-term SIP plan. And that's the product of good work from a variety of staff members, where I ask them the question, as you look at the kinds of things that we have to plan for, that's including all of our facilities, our IT needs, our vehicles, the major capital items that we spend money on, help us build out a plan that's thinking of all of the issues, not just a 1 year's worth. And so we've taken a first shot at that. That is in the folder, the inside folder to the left. In there you're going to see both the SIP 25 plan, which is the colorful one that has lots of pages, and the one that's not colorful, it's just black and white, that's the long-term SIP plan. You have that again in the folder of that binder. We've added 6 new positions. I say 4 911 operators, that's correct. We also have an additional 911 supervisor. So 911 is actually getting 5 new supervisors, 5 new positions. 4 of them are operators. The reason for that is these new fire contracts. Many of you are familiar with the fact that we're taking on 911 services for rural fire departments, and those are gradually coming into play, and they need the staff members to handle that additional workload. It's noteworthy that since fiscal year 22, this budget reflects a 31% increase in the general fund spending and a 65% increase in public safety sales tax. It is remarkable that we have seen the large revenue increases that have allowed for this increase. We've had a lagging in terms of our spending catching up with the additional revenue. That's typically not a problem in government, but that's been the case because our revenue increased by just that much. The PPRT, as I mentioned, was a temporary increase, but we have substantial increases. Some of these, as you know, just related to inflation. We had, in the last 4 years, inflation has been about 20%, and that rolled through our salary and our benefits. Some of it is because our health insurance has taken it on the chin, and we've had a substantial increase, a 22% increase in claims just this year. And so that creates challenges. Some of it was related to deferred expenses. So we had capital needs, we had building needs, we had things that really we couldn't keep up with. We fell behind on, and then we had the opportunity, because of the windfall of revenue, to deal with some of those deferred issues. I won't belabor this. These are big numbers, I understand. We've got a plan for next year, $75.1 million. The current projected actual, again, for the general fund is $77.9 million. Public safety sales tax, $48.2 is the plan for the fiscal year 25, and projected actual is $39.1. In terms of our SIP budgets, I already mentioned that we're doing both a fiscal year 25 plan, but also for the first time a long-term capital plan. These are the sources of revenue that go into that. We also have a carryover balance that's from fiscal year 24. We're not able to complete all the projects in a 12-month period, and so we carry over the money as we carry over the projects. We do eventually get them done, but sometimes it takes more than the 12 months in a fiscal year. The deficit budget that you have in front of you is primarily to fund the SIP 25 and the long-term capital plan, as I said. We're very fortunate that we have excess fund balances in both the general fund and the public safety sales tax fund because of the windfall revenue years that we experienced the last few years. We've now, in the fiscal year 25 budget, we're turning a corner. We peaked in fiscal year 24. We're now spending the additional fund balance that was set aside in these last few years. We have the capacity to do that for a short window of time. We can't do it forever, but it is not an irresponsible thing to take capital money and long-term capital money out of substantial fund balances. SIP budget for 25 is a $5.8 million. The long-term capital budget is $5.6 million. And then the current anticipated spending for fiscal year 24 is the $4.3 million. We approved a budget for substantially more than that, and that's why we will carry over a large amount of money that will be spent in fiscal year 25. River Bluff is good news. The short version on River Bluff is that they also have turned a corner, and they are, I believe, in a spot going forward where they should be profitable. And when I say profitable, I mean that's inclusive of the increased levy and the reduced county administrative fee. So you've got the numbers there. We're continuing the increase in the levy. We're continuing the reduction of the county administration fee. It was $1.1 million. It's now $500,000. So it's a substantial reduction we did in the current fiscal year that we're carrying forward. We believe that this leaves a balance of about $1.4 million, and capital projects will be the first place that comes from. Whatever residual beyond those capital projects will help to reduce the very large negative cash balance that River Bluff still has and that is borrowed from the general fund. Challenges and opportunities. The PPRT reduction, as I mentioned, the health insurance claims, the tort fund, increased levy for VAC, increased levy for Social Security, above inflation salary and benefit increases. This is our reality. We don't, in salary and benefits, we don't have inflation, we have above inflation. The reason for that is because of medical inflation on the health insurance side and the fact that we have longevity increases, we have step increases built into our contracts. And so we don't just give inflation, we give more than inflation in our salary increases. We have a lot of demands on these excess fund balances that we have. The public safety building project that's coming up, the court and case management software that we know is millions of dollars, police training center, potential operating deficits, the 1.3 million operating deficit that we have in the general fund this year will only get substantially worse between now and next year. It's going to be a different kind of a budget process in fiscal year 26 because of that. We have a fixed total amount for the levy, as I mentioned. On the positive side, there's reason to believe the casino revenue will substantially increase. You remember that half of that's going to the SIP fund, half of it's going to roads. Marijuana revenue is not increasing, but it's still a substantial revenue source. We do have increased inflation on the sales tax revenue. We have income tax increased as well. We have this SIP and long-term capital planning process. I believe that's a strength. I believe that going forward it will be beneficial to us to have that planning and to be able to see beyond the next 12 months what's coming. And then finally, we are very fortunate, as I said, to have the fund balances that are available to spend. That's all for me, and I appreciate you hanging in there with me. I tried to talk fast, and you notice at the beginning I did not say that I would be brief.
Phone number. Ms. Go.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that, Valerie, because, Mrs. Hanter, because I understand that this is a tremendous amount of information to get, and I really do want to be available to answer questions. And I know that it's just a lot to absorb. So please reach out to me as you look through, as you have things that look odd or you're not sure about, please ask those questions. We'll be going over this in the Finance Committee. The layover will be the beginning of September, and then you recall that we have a 3-week layover, and so we'll vote on this on September 26th. The reason we have all the time we do between now and when this comes forward to a vote is because we want you to feel empowered. We want you to get what you need to have your questions answered. Yeah.
Ms. Goro.
Since I have been on, thank you, since I have been on this board, I have asked why we did not have a CIP program. And thank you, because now we have one. Maybe we won't always be in debt because it's due today, paid today. And so we never do get it paid in time. And I think this is one of the best things I've seen in a long, long time. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome, and I give credit to others to getting it started, and we're just carrying it forward.
Thank you, Ms. Goro. Jaime?
Just got 2 questions for you, Steve, and maybe for the next finance. One is if we could get the list of the increases on the tax levies breakout. I wasn't at one of the Finance Committee. Maybe it was presented there. That, and then the question that I have is from the CPI stuff, how much is on the reserve side still considered art money that is going to be expensed? Obviously, we have until this end of the year, right, to encumber those expenditures. But how much of those reserves are art money? If we can get a breakdown of that, that'd be great. Just from my perspective, looking at the CIP kind of budget for 2025 versus what's in the reserves as art money, that still needs to be spent out.
Yeah, we have, you'll see that there's a American Rescue Plan fund budget, and I want to say off the top of my head, it's like $24.5 million that's still left to spend, and we understand we have to just have that committed by the end of the year. That's not included in my perception of what's reserve. No, that's just the general fund and the public safety sales tax fund.
It's a separate bucket?
It's in a separate fund, and that's included in the book.
That's Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Penny, and then Mr. Scroll.
Just one quick question. How long has it been since we've had a CIP plan?
Well, we had the first one in 2021. It was adopted mid-year, and then we skipped 22, and we had one for 23, and then we had one for the current fiscal year 24, and now 25.
Awesome. No, I appreciate seeing that as well, so thank you.
Mr. Scroll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last year, we voted on a resolution to expand our dispatch at the 911 center to an area fire department. At the time, I had some reservations about that. We were told that it would generate roughly $80,000 a year in revenue for us through the $15 fee. At the time, I questioned whether we could provide that service for $15. In the 15th district, most of my residents reside in the city, and they depend on city services, and they pay many times that for their 911 services. I was also concerned whether we could provide those services with existing personnel and whether or not we'd have to add to that. I asked those questions on the floor, and I asked those questions in committee. I was assured multiple times that we would not have to add personnel, that this would not cost us money, that this would be a revenue generator. I was taken aback when I, before a meeting, looked at the summary by department and saw a $450,000 increase in the 911 center. And when you go to the next page, it specifically references that that is due to 5 more dispatchers to cover rural fire 911 calls. Collectively, I feel we were misled on this issue. Personally, I feel that I was lied to on this issue, and this has significantly eroded my faith in staff. So I just wanted to point that out. I will have a hard time supporting similar service expansion at the 911 center moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scroll.
Just if I may, of the 450,000, about 290,000 of that is related to the new positions, and there's anticipated about 275,000 of revenue that would be new income that would come in from those relationships. So it's not a match, but they are similar numbers. The way you get from the 290,000 for the new positions and the 450 is like in a lot of our budgets, we're not fully staffed. And so what you see in the projected actuals is not inclusive of a full staff, but when we budget for that next year, we budget at a full staff level. And that doesn't mean that we'll achieve that. We struggle in a lot of areas to actually have a full staff for a full year. But the difference of 450,000 is not all related just to those new people. I just want to point that out.
I appreciate that. A lot of what you just brought to light was discussed, and we specifically talked about whether we were at capacity with staffing, whether we would have to add to that, and we were given different answers then than what you're saying now. I also question, I've run the numbers. I've looked at every single rural fire department that we do not dispatch, and they're all very small, and they have small run volumes. We will not recoup at $15 per run what we're spending for this. We will not do it.
Thank you. Mr. Arena?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to follow up on Mr. Scroll's point, do we have some figures on what it takes to be revenue neutral on service we're providing? So we started out at 15. He's suggesting that we need to move that up. Has that been evaluated, and do we know what that number should be?
I really think the sheriff's office needs to answer the question, do they even intend to have it be a balanced item? To this point, I had heard conversation that they anticipated that there would be some subsidy, and so that's not a new concept to me. But I think because this is under the purview of the sheriff, they need to answer that question. What's their intent? And if break even is the intent, that we can calculate what it would take to get there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arena. Any other questions for Mr. Schultz for this evening? No, Mr. Webster is not present. Who would like the honors? Mr. Thompson motions to adjourn. Is there a second by Mr. Sweeney?